Hi, everyone. This is Cynthia Wisehart. I'm the editor of Sound and Video Contractor, and I'm here today with Cynthia Menna of ADI Global, and we're here to talk about a favorite topic of mine, which is upselling. I just set the scene a little bit, which is that I come from an end user background, and I know that in this industry, relationships are really everything. And my experience, I worked in theme parks and museums, was that upselling was a real relationship builder for me. I relied on the expertise of my partners to really understand how to take a project to next level. And so we're going to talk about that upsell relationship today with Cynthia. And I want to remind you all that although I worked on very large scale, very large budget projects, what we're going to be talking about today is scalable. It's applicable at every level, however you're interacting with your customers. And I think both of us are on the same page with this, that we really want to encourage you to step into this role as a consultative upselling person and to realize through this conversation that there's a lot of support available for you to do that. You don't have to do it on your own, but we hope you'll come away from this feeling like you can take a chance on that and you can build your relationships with your customers that way. So I'll go ahead and let Cynthia introduce herself to you, and then we'll jump into a conversation.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that. And I think one of my favorite topics is also upselling, how we can work together to grow wallet share, to expand on capabilities. From an introduction perspective, Cynthia Menna, I'm the Vice President and Global Manager of AV at ADI and Snap One. I've been in this industry for over 20 years between both the Resi Smart Home and commercial AV business, and enjoyed, to Cynthia's earlier point, long tenured relationships because relationships do matter. We need to be the trusted partner to our customers in partnership with our supplier partners, and excited to talk today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, great. I'm glad we can jump into this. So, in light of that, can you just kind of generally quantify the overall opportunity? Like, why does upselling matter?
I think upselling matters for a lot of different reasons. I think the top one is obviously generating more revenue, but it's really about identifying opportunities both at the customer level and to and through the end user level to really enhance projects, to do the right thing, to be able to pivot and to identify other options and opportunities. Um, Listen, it's like any recipe, any design. When you're building a house, you start off with one idea and you go through the process and you realize that, listen, you wanted that kitchen bigger. You wanted the double ovens, right? When you go into it, you have to be understanding of the fact that technology, be it in the corporate world or in a QSR environment or a classroom, we have to be nimble, but we also have to identify the best options for our customers and make people aware of options. Again, technology is changing and evolving, but also the opportunities to grow wallet share through upselling in new categories is still ever present. And I think as we look at the end user community, they're asking for us to be more technology centric. They're asking to have a tighter relationship on the integration level. They don't want to shop around to five different technologists. They want to really have one person they can consult with and drive the project, whether that's on the networking, the audiovisual, or the security side of the business. And your ability and our customers' ability to go after that business is critically important to remain sticky and relevant, but also to, again, provide the right solution and be cohesive with their partners.
Yeah, cohesive. That's interesting. So, one of the things I'm hearing between the lines here is that one area that may be an opportunity is some adjacent type of technology. So, we've all got a lot to learn. Technologically speaking, we have to stay on top of the ever changing landscape. But can you sort of flag a few areas where some adjacent expertise may really set you apart at the table with your customer?
Absolutely. So I think as we're talking about, I mean, going back to that cohesive component, right? Systems talking to each other, everything is on the network. We know that now, right? I mean, this is not merging to the network. I mean, our products and our technologies sit on top of a network, and having and making those technologies speak to each other seamlessly, and in a way that makes sense to the end user and that is familiar, as opposed to having three separate kind of platforms, is a very important, right? But B, as we look at merging technologies, whether it's AV to security, security to AV, there's so many natural kind of crossover points, right? When we're talking about what was more traditionally in the security space, like mass notification, how that ties into AV, whether that's through using mass notification as traditional sense, which is audio driven, and then taking it to video, so that not only can you hear emergency messaging or take directions, but now that you can see it through digital signage and other platforms. So it's really taking the entire ecosystem of technology and putting it and tying it all together.
Right. So, specifically into some of these areas like security, what do you think are some obstacles for people? Do people worry about they may have liability if they start volunteering information about security? And if you're in security, where are the gaps that help you go into AV? Where do you see those knowledge gaps making people maybe less confident?
I think the biggest misnomer around getting into security is the licensing and some of the requirements, right? And there are licensing requirements. I certainly don't want to downplay that. It's a life safety application, but there are certainly areas, as maybe an AV integrator, a datacom integrator who's stepping into the security place, where they could get much more proficient in video surveillance, access control solutions. When you're working on larger corporate facilities, a lot of times boardrooms, key office areas, etc., have access control cards to swipe in and out of those spaces to keep them protected, or maintain integrity of data and information. That's certainly a technology that should be something that an AV integrator should be considering growing into, because it's part of the ecosystem of that solution in that environment as they're working in a corporate space, especially. But that's probably one of the big, I think, around security would be licensing requirements and some fears. But again, tied to outside of life safety and true intrusion solutions, those requirements are really less tasking, if not existent at all. Anywhere state that requires any kind of licensing around low voltage, I mean, of course, you'd have to have that regardless. But life safety is a little bit different. For the security customer who's going into AV and reverse, I think it's just fear of the unknown. And the reality of it is, I mentioned mass notification. You're installing speakers, you're installing amplifiers already, but you're not calling it AV. So, or you're doing command and control and you're installing video surveillance monitors, you're already in the space. It's really just taking it one step beyond. So,
Yes, and so there's a couple ways people can do this. One of the things they can do is obviously pursue education, certification. There's cross certifications for security and for AV. They can educate themselves to build their confidence, but then the other thing they can do is obviously build their own relationship network with us, what I would just call like co-experts, people who can be on the team. So can you talk a little bit about what what role you guys might play in a situation where you're helping somebody expand or upsell?
so we want to be a resource, and I think a big part of our job, both philosophically, but I mean directionally speaking as well, is we need to connect people. We need to connect technology. We need to make introductions. We need to be able to, and fortunately, I'm very fortunate to have an army of security, audiovisual, datacom experts, both from a field perspective, in market, but also on the backside through our support and design capabilities as well to help again kind of cross and provide that crossover training, but also just again industry connections, whether it's pointing them to a supplier who may specialize in mass notification, right? When we talk about sort of our supplier relationships, they're just so critically important to us. But also in reverse, also going to industry. So again, if we have relationships with fire and burg associations or with surveillance companies, right, to be able to make those connections. And our goal in doing that is making our partners comfortable, helping enable them to grow, giving them the tools and the resources. And I think that's where I would, with every customer I speak to, is leverage our resources. They're vast. Um, we are more than happy to share them. We want to support you. Lean on us if you need design assistance. If you need a partner, if you're working in a market and maybe you don't have the in-house skill set or the in-house labor to produce some of these projects, let us refer you to people. That kind of peer-to-peer partnership can be very, very valuable as companies are looking to grow or to flex their workforce or capabilities. And again, given our background, we can do that.
That can happen at the sales point, obviously at the beginning. It can happen at the RFP level. Say someone gets a proposal, a request for a proposal, they can come to you at that point in the sequence. So are there any other inflection points in the install where there's an opportunity presents for upsell? Because like you mentioned, how a kitchen evolves as people are working on it. So what are the inflection points in a sales process and an installation process where there's an opportunity for upsell?
So I think you mentioned a few. Is obviously the natural ones when you get the request or you get the quote when you sit down with the customer. But I think also as you're doing the install and you see the environment, right? As a solution is presented, again, unfortunately, an RFP could happen 6, 12 months before, and technology is ever evolving. You want to make sure that your customer and whom you're serving, has the latest and greatest in technology, and being able to educate them through that process. We talk about that consultant sell. You've got to be the spirit guide to that customer to help them understand where you see opportunities and gaps in their project, but also where there's again upsell opportunities because of new technology, because of just things that you're observing from a job site perspective. You might be observing the fact that you're doing a floor of a corporate building, and one of the rooms that you're doing is HR, but there's no card access system. Had they considered that? One of the things that we've done a really good job at is helping our customers ask questions. We need to help, you don't know what you don't know. So giving some guidelines of when you're on a job site, when you're talking about certain products and technologies, here are some of the questions that you should ask. So at least that you can gather some of that information, collect it, and give it back to us, and then we can help you respond to it very quickly.
So that brings up what I think is an important point, which is that just because somebody's issued an RFP with a specification, it doesn't mean that you can't venture forth with some thoughts and ideas. And in my experience, even if the customer isn't prepared to pay for additional scope or they don't know if they're ready for it, when I see or would see suggestions in a response that were bigger picture maybe than what I'd asked for, it was a positive relationship building thing. So one of the things I guess I would say, and you can affirm this, if you go back to your customers with a few even boilerplate type expertise notes, that is something that they can work with you, correct? To say, look, in case you haven't thought about it, here's XYZ, here are principles of the job that you might want to additionally think about. And some of that can be quite general. It doesn't have to necessarily be that you're going to write in all the equipment that would be used for that access control, to use your example, but really more just to say, here is almost a checklist of things that have you thought about these things. So I am assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if people want to come to you ahead of time and say, hey, what are some of these things that I should maybe boilerplate into my RFPs to show that I have awareness?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, again, as we think of this as a consultative sale, we should be armed. And it should be expected that we're walking in and making recommendations, giving guidance, talking through the scope of the project, even that of which we may not have control over, but understanding. I mean, if someone, security customers walking into a client, what are you doing for AB? If the answer is we've got it covered, can you help me understand a little bit more so that I can maybe even make recommendations on the security side of how to tie into that more cohesively? If the answer is I don't really have a great partner in that, how can I help you? And we can certainly, you can come back to us with that RFP, with that bill of materials, with the request, and we can help you kind of identify what's best for the project, best case, partners in terms of suppliers, if there's training requirements, again, bridging the gap between that. But again, we should always be looking at our customers and helping them consult, helping them expand, but giving them the resources to come back to us to go fulfill that BOM or fulfill that RFP.
So if someone's sitting here listening to this and thinking, I don't really build those things into my responses, or I don't really have on my website, kind of just a summary to show that I have awareness of these areas. Tactically, what do people do? Like, do they come to you for a menu? Just walk through that. I'm sitting out here and I've never really thought about upselling, or I have, but I haven't really known how to tactically go about it. What is my first step?
I think, from my perspective is don't go in it alone. We have resources, um, again, both field and desk based resources that can look at the opportunity with you, can go call on that opportunity with you so that you're not in it alone. I think, as I mentioned before, it's the fear of the unknown often that kind of inhibits us from asking those questions. I don't know what to ask, so therefore I'm not going to ask anything at all. I don't want to paint myself into a corner. You don't have to feel that way. And I think, we've got, digital platforms that people can go on and get content off of. Our website experience is second to none. You can go on, download content. You can see vertical market applications that tie in ecosystems of security, datacom, AV. So you can start getting yourself kind of familiar with the main components just by going online, right? But we can also take that and get it more specific to the opportunity of the customer. Our job is to provide the right products for the application, but also to your point, helping our partners open their eyes to what technology is out there. So again, talking about, you walk into a customer and maybe they haven't considered, gunshot technology. If it's a school or a place that has large quantities of people, are we having those conversations? Have you considered that, Mr. and Mrs. End User, right? Um, there's just so many things that I think we can address, but again, consult and help drive how that conversation takes place without making someone feel that they're going to be caught off guard. They don't know enough to answer the question or come back to. But again, helping them realize what the opportunities and what technology is out there.
Right. So tactically, I'm hearing something interesting. If it were me doing it, I'd be going to your site and kind of wrapping my head around these different categories, perhaps even using some of the language that you've laid out on the site, thinking about my boilerplate for my RFP or for my sales pitches, and making sure that a few paragraphs might be included, just to touch and show my customer that I'm open and aware of these topics. And then if you do go into an actual opportunity, a specific opportunity, come back to you and say, what do we need to do to flesh this out, to at least show our interest and our availability to some of these adjacent categories. And then you do go along. If there's an interview, you can bring people into the process. So to your point, where there's going to get a question thrown out and you may have prepared your sort of top line understanding, but now there's a granular question. Who's there to pick up that granular question and be able to answer it authoritatively so that you keep the flow going with the customer and their trust in you? So I think that kind of helps give people an orientation of how to go about the process. One of the things that came up when we were talking about this ahead of time was, could you also point out some of you mentioned the gunshot technology. I'd like to actually dig into that example because I know for me, when you first said it, I was like, how is that got anything to do with what we do? Maybe you can explain a little bit just to give a granular example.
Yeah, so I think as we're looking, and I'll kind of take a step back as well, as a technology partner to an end user, you probably already have a relationship in place because you're having the conversation already, right? They're coming to you with an RFP, you've got a relationship rapport, you've done work with them before. Having the conversation around, I'm growing and I'm going into new technology, I'm going into security, I'm going into AV, I'm going into you name it, right? And I think in many, many cases, if you are the person that they're having the conversation with in that moment, they're going to have a lot of respect and trust already in you because, again, you're already at the table. And might intuitively probably an opportunity to bid out new categories of product that maybe you had not bid out for them before, right? So I think taking that and harnessing that and that discussion with that customer is really, really important. We've worked together for a long time. I'm growing my business. I'm now getting into, like I said, AV or security. If we're looking at other types of technology that tie into, gunshot detection, right? You're working in large environments, you're working in busy environments, and unfortunately, we live in a world today that has dictated the use of technology to, detect gunshots. That technology can tie into many different applications. I mentioned earlier digital signage, right? The ability to, active shooter on site, they're messaging through visually. Maybe they're doing that in lieu of messaging audibly in a site. And there are certainly reasons why you may or may not want to do audible because maybe you can't hear over the sound, but maybe you can more visually see that. So I think there's all these kind of crossover technologies as we look at the merge that do tie into what we might consider disparate today, but really one platform and one solution to the end user.
Yeah, and I thought that example was important because it just reminds you of just how potentially off point some of these opportunities might be, and that part of having a partnership is to be able to go, we see this somewhere else. This might apply to your job. We've had experience doing that. We've seen this new technology. And to understand that part of the upsell is going to come from the fact that you're exposed to such a breadth of applications. And sometimes things that may really come as a surprise opportunity will come up in these encounters, in these sales conversations. So we're getting close to wrapping up here, I think. Is there anything you wanted to say to sum this up, or anything maybe we didn't touch on that you wanted to add to the conversation?
I think, in summary, I think the key takeaway is that for this audience to know that you're not in it alone. And we've talked a lot about leveraging resources, that there's a tremendous amount of resources amongst the ADI community, amongst our supplier community. Let us help you bridge the gap. Let us help do some of that work for you and take some of the pressure that you might feel as a result of getting into a new project or new technology or new adjacent space. Let us help you with that. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We probably have been involved in, again, we are vertically agnostic. So we cross over so many categories of not just products, but vertical markets as well. Let us take some of the guesswork and work off your plate, and again, leverage your resources, and let us help us partner with you to grow your business and get stickier with your customers.
Yeah, grow those relationships.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you and thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.